Hi everyone, good morning, and thanks for this beautiful presentation before me here. That sets the bar pretty high. So today what I will talk with you guys about is oil and gas and the net zero challenge. And especially I want to raise the big question, is there a way for a win-win here? And when you look at the slide here, then you think, oh Jesus, this is yet another death by PowerPoint presentation. And I assure you, no it's not. So since this is EDU, we want to do things a little bit different today. With my technical background, I usually talk to a lot of engineers, so I throw a ton of equations at the front here, which is something we absolutely don't want to do today. Today, we're going a very, very different route. I'm going to show you a few photos, because this is how I perceive the world around me. This is how I digest, essentially, my environment, and use those a little bit as a guidance for the narrative that I will present to you. Before we go into the details, though, I would like to talk with you about what motivates us. I actually don't have the clicker. Next slide, please. And one of the big motivations for us is obviously very similar to the theme that we heard already, nature. So what you see on this slide here is a scene of a bald eagle capturing a hake, which is a fish that sort of migrates into the offshore of Vancouver Island, into the inlands, into the fjords. It's grabbing that fish, and it's a very, very special scene. Because during short times of the year, the hake migrates in, and there's a very strong upwelling that pushes the fish at very high speeds up to the surface, stuns the fish, and you have these beautiful bald eagles, hundreds of them, waiting in the crowns of the trees, coming in, sweeping in, and catching this fish. So why do I show you this here? I show you this because it's one of the most beautiful spectacles in nature that I've ever seen. And it's right offshore here. I also show you this because that's something that I believe we need to preserve. And it's not the only thing in nature that's worth preserving, obviously. But I want that a scene like this can be seen by everybody, can be seen by my children, and can be seen by the children of my children. So one of the big motivations for me and for us at Ambyint to do what we do is this, environmental stewardship, and helping organizations with natural resource exploration in a more sustainable manner. Naturally, there's other aspects of life too. And a big one for that matter is our standard of living. Now, when you hear me talk, you probably get reminded of a certain actor from Austria who has a very similar accent to me, Mr. Arnold. So, as you can imagine, I didn't grow up here. I'm from Europe originally. And with that, I'm one of about 25% of the Canadian population who actually are immigrants who were born somewhere else. With that comes my family is distributed all over the planet. My wife's family is from the US. My family is back home in Germany and France. And my children actually live in Tokyo. And if you have ever been to Tokyo, I absolutely love this city, then you will realize that this is what you see. This town, this city is buzzing of electricity. Everything is full of light, full of sound, full of smells. Interestingly, though, over 90% of the energy Japan consumes is generated by hydrocarbons. This January, after visiting my kids over in Tokyo, I flew home, came back to Calgary, and what was I greeted with? Every Calgarian will know, a polar vortex out of everything. So it was minus 35. It was freezing cold at the airport. And in addition to that, if you know what a polar vortex is, these things usually sit like big caps on our provinces here in the West. It's really cold, it's dark because we're near 51 degrees north. There's no wind, there's hardly any sun because it was pretty dark anyways and there were a lot of clouds. So there was a pretty long period of time where we were basically freezing, and the only thing that kept us warm was hydrocarbons. 95% of the energy generated in Alberta during that time came from hydrocarbons. So there's a dilemma. On the one hand, we see this beautiful nature, we want to be good stewards of our environment. On the other hand, we have this life standard of living and this economy that keeps us alive. How can we reconcile that? There's one factor in there that I believe is often treated a little bit not with the respect and with the attention that it deserves. And that's another motivation for us. A few years ago, I was at a Christmas dinner with folks from work, and one of the guys, he used to work up in the north, in northern Alberta in BC, in the oil field and the gas fields. And he told me the story about what, what work up there actually looks like. And it's tough. It's really tough. They have faced temperatures of -30, -40 without a wind chill very regularly. And why do they do that? They do that so that we can have our safe and comfortable life. At the same time, he told me about an accident that he had up there working on a high-pressure pipeline where a little piece of metal dislodged and almost killed him. So that made me think. That really touched me. That really moved me, because I know that these people put their life and their health on the line for us, for our safety, for our well-being. So knowing all that, the question came up for us, and that's really a big motivation to do for doing what we do, is how can we change that? And why hasn't it been changed before? How can we leverage AI and technology to really have an impact there? The reason why it's so difficult is because these organizations, while they have the best intentions, they face so many obstacles. They really face what I would call a multi-layered challenge. And let me walk you through a few of those. One is there's fewer and fewer talent actually willing and interested to work in oil and gas. So we have a significant labor shortage out there. Second, wherever you go out there, there's a lot of manual processes. When you have manual processes, then standardization takes a hit. Third of all, technology. A lot of especially larger organizations grow by acquisitions and mergers, so they incorporate all this IT, OT from other organizations that doesn't necessarily follow their standards. And fourth, and I would argue that's almost probably one of the biggest ones, is the vast amount of unstructured data. When you have unstructured data, you can't really use them. Data that doesn't have a lot of context is not actionable. So while we collect massive amounts of data, we can't really use it. So how can we overcome this? The one big lesson that we have learned over the last 7 or 8 years is before we can do anything, before we can apply AI, before we can train machine learning models, we have to make sure that these data are structured. So over painstaking years, we developed technology that really can absorb all this data from wherever it is, put it into context, put it into structure, order it, such that we then can use that information to either directly distribute it out to make data more digestible, release information. At the same time, once you're at this stage, you can start training AI models. You can start training machine learning models. And those things are great. Those things are really, really good at determining and finding patterns. So you can do anomaly detection, predictive maintenance, and all that. However, it goes one step further. If you have the ability to actually send signals back to the well site, and we work in upstream oil and gas, that's what we do, then you can actually take over control. So that means if you can detect patterns that precede certain negative events and anomalies, you can actually take control action and prevent them from happening in the first place. So that is massive. That has huge implications on how can we actually leverage AI and machine learning to really cause big, big effects out in the field. Then let me walk you through what I talk about when I talk about win-win. There's many aspects in our life where we see that win-win happening. Why am I showing you this picture? Because I think that's a great example. I love this scene where we can actually see this. For instance, here, this lady is donning this beautiful yukata or kimono traditional dress, where she has combined this with these funky red shoes and the almost cyberpunk-like hair. It's this unique scene where we see these combinations of something, brought along, where we have something traditional, where we have something established being combined with something new from a completely different field, creates something beautiful and special. There's obviously other areas more related to technology where this applies as well. Just think about 15, 20 years ago, and I'm obviously dating myself here, when we drove through the towns and you had this big, paper map. My kids don't know anymore what that is, but it actually existed. You had to work your way through the different towns to find your goals. Nowadays, we combined this with AI and different kinds of cloud technology. Now you have your assistant. You basically have a driving assistant that tells you where to go and when to take a left and when to take a right. It's like a co-pilot. And that is the same concept that we took over at Ambyint as well. This is where we essentially took these algorithms that now guide our actions and guide the actions of folks out in the field, folks like engineers, to make their life better and more efficient. Let's give you a few examples of what the impact of that actually is. when you start really automating these processes, you see huge impact on production efficiency, for instance. We see anything from 10 to 20% production uplift. So this is where that economic bucket is hit. But at the other hand, that's where the win-win comes in. These well site visits, especially the manual interventions, decrease typically anywhere in the range of 30 to 60%. 30 to 60%. If someone is out there in the winter and now they don't have to go out there anymore to work on the site to take care of these dangerous things, we can get them back home safely. That's meaningful. Last but not least, typically, since due to more efficiency, we can also prevent events such as venting, which is really releasing tons of methane into the atmosphere. We can actually show that by leveraging this sort of automation, you can reduce venting events by 75%. So again, that's a huge, huge number, which really speaks to putting this technology into place at the right time with the right backbone of technology, this big data stuff. You can have huge impact on this industry. All right, so this is a little bit the technology and the way I and we at Ambyint actually go about this challenge. But this wouldn't be an EDU talk if I wouldn't pass the question back to you. We all are in the same boat here. We all face exactly the same challenge, that we want to protect what we love. We all want to go out there, we want to enjoy our nature. At the same time, we have to make sure that we preserve all this and that we have our standard of living. We want to make sure that everybody else can have this too. So the question to you would really be, how are you helping with the win-win opportunity? Think about it. We are here to talk, Benjamin Camp, Lindsay Patrician, and myself from Ambyint are here. I would love to hear your thoughts on what I talked today. I think this is a very important topic, and thank you very much for your time today.